so many a large cross section of everyone, all artists. So thank you so much. It feels great to be here and um, working on the Gita Govindam and talking about the Gita Govindam is like now for me also it is uncharted territory, and I've been working on this for 1.5 years now on this whole subject, and looking at it from the point of view of so there are one or two disclaimers which I want to make here, just to make, draw the bottom line here. One is that these 5 days are definitely not sufficient for us to go into every single song, every line, every word, every meaning. That is an impossibility, because every song of the Gita Govindam has multiple layers. So what is seen on the surface is definitely not what is what it is. So there are multiple layers. So if we are going to look at the entire text, line by line, that we just don't have the time. We'll have to do a month's workshop for that. So what I've done is I've divided it into sections in such a way that my intent here is to understand how to enter into the Gita Govindam, how to enter into this whole system called the Gita Govindam. Because from what I have studied over the last 1.5 years, I found that Gita Govindam is actually, very honestly to put it, it is an upasana paddhati. It is a method of understanding female energy, the balance between the male and the female energies. It is basically a prayer methodology. That is what it is, which is exactly why the reason why it would have been danced as a ritual in the temple for so many centuries, as a ritual worship. Because the very sounds of the text, the context of the text, the combination between the Shabda and the Artha, these two are primordial to understanding what is the essence of this text called the Gita Govindam. So before we begin, so today, after today, you may wonder, is this a workshop on the Gita Govindam? Because the first part of the whole, today's session, I will be laying down some basic concepts so that we understand the Gita Govindam much better. The first concept is the background. In what is the background in which this text was written? What is the background of Jayadeva? At the time when Jayadeva wrote this text, what is the background? This is the first thing we will understand. The second thing is, what is the significance of the esoteric idea behind 3, 6, and 9? That is the 12 chapters, 24 songs, and 72 shlokas. So this gives us 3, 6, and 9. 3, 6, and 9 is the primordial sequence. It is called the vortex. So we will understand what this vortex methodology is about. The third thing is, how is the Gita Govindam a Shakta principle? Basically, it's a tantric Shakta based idea. So we will look at something called the Matrika Chakra, upon which we will base our understanding. And from that point, we will start the very first shloka, which is Meghair Meduram Ambaram. So from that aspect, we will take it. So I have to set these concepts out first before we even touch the text. So please bear with me, because this is very, very important for us to set the tone. Once we understand these concepts, everything, it's like an onion, it will start peeling. We will start understanding layer and layer and layer of the entire text. So first we begin with all these concepts. Let's start with the background. Now, about the time of Jayadeva, there are multiple opinions. Some scholars place him in the late 12th century. Some scholars place him in the early 13th century. So whatever that may be, between 1190 to 1220, any time could have been the time of the Gita Govindam. Also, we have to understand that the Gita Govindam is very interesting in its context because, according to me, it is a sequel of the Bhagavata Purana. It is a sequel to the Dashamaskanda, or the 10th chapter, the Rasa Leela Ghattam, or the Rasa Leela section of the Bhagavata Purana. What Jayadeva has done, because the Bhagavata Purana is a text and it treats Krishna as Krishna Bhagavan, it treats him as Bhagavan. But Jayadeva's Gita Govindam is a Prabandha work. It is a poetic work, it's a fictional work. So he has taken a detour after going to some extent within the Rasa Leela section of the Bhagavatam. He has taken a detour. And then he has, fleshed out Krishna and Radha in a way that no other poet has managed to do. No poet has done before him and no poet has done after him what he did with Radha and Krishna. So he gave them the flesh and blood that the Bhagavatam could not give because it's a text. So because he was his Krishna Bhagavan, so he humanized Krishna. He brought out Krishna's emotions through the Gita Govindam. So this detour is very interesting, how he has taken the detour, and for that, how he has used these three characters, Krishna, Radha, and the Sakhi, with Madana hiding here and there throughout the text, in order to bring out the import of the whole idea. So this is the basic layout of the whole structure. So let's look at the background. Now, there is one problem with the way we as dancers, or we as even as historians in the Indian context, the way we perceive our history. We have some blanket rules that we put upon things. Like, for example, we all know that the Bhakti movement, when it actually started, that was a time when Buddhism was at its height. There was a huge spread of Buddhism right from the 5th centuries till the 10th century. We could see the impact of Buddhism pan-India, everywhere. Right from Tamil Nadu to, you write down, you can see Buddhism everywhere. You can see in Manimekhala, you can see in the Sanskrit works, you can see in the north, you can see everywhere Buddhism was very strong. Combined with Islamic invasions periodically, there was this feeling that there has to be a Hindu thought, a revival in a different format. By then, a lot of thinkers were emerging, kick-started, of course, by the Alvar movements, and their Vishnu devotionalism. So starting from there, many movements started. And then with the coming of Ramanujacharya, there was this huge wave in Bhakti Vedanta, where they differed from Shankaracharya's Advaita, and they, took this path of, my God is a beautiful God. My God has all the best attributes. He is a Saguna Parabrahma. So they took this attitude, and starting with Ramanuja, Ramanuja's thought impacted Vaishnava thought everywhere. Now, because Ramanuja propagated Vishishtadvaita, the philosophy of, Sri Vaishnavism, what we call, it became a blanket rule in all our minds that since it was a counter movement to Buddhism, that it was born to counter Buddhism. So therefore, Buddha that is mentioned in every Dashavatara in Vaishnavism is only Purana Buddha, that he is not Gautama Buddha. This became a fixed thought in our minds. Now, the Purana Buddha, for those of you who don't know who is the Purana Buddha, so this is a reference to the story of Tripura Samhara, the Shiva, from the Shiva Puran, where the Tripurasuras have to be killed by Shiva, and to distract the Patnis or the wives of the Asuras, Vishnu takes an avatara as Buddha. So this reference is what we follow blindly. And we think that since it is against Buddhism, the revival of Vaishnavism is against Buddhism. So therefore, Gautama Buddha cannot be included in the pantheon. Now, this is where we make our mistake. Because now this is what is the background is very important for us as to why and how Tantra, how did it come into the whole picture? Now, this was the time of Buddhism. When Jayadeva came, it was a time of Buddhism. This was a time of the Pala kings. You had in Bengal and in Orissa. There was very strong Buddhist cults in Bengal and in Orissa at that time. Now, the history of Bengal Vaishnavism or Bengal or Orissa-based Vaishnavism is very different from what happened in South India. The whole idea is very different. So when we look at that concept, it was a flourishing period of Vajrayana and Sahajayana Buddhism. These were two branches of Buddhism that were very, very prominent at that time. And these two branches of Buddhism used a lot of tantric principles. There was a lot of tantra being used in it. It was called Tantric Buddhism. It was during the reign of the Pala kings of Bengal and lasted almost till the Mohammedan conquests of Eastern India. It lasted till then. Now, especially on Bengal and Orissa, the Vajrayana and the Sahajayana Buddhism was showing its impact very greatly. Now, when the Muslim invasions happened, on one side you had the Muslim rulers, and on one side you had the recreated Vaishnava movements that were beginning. So there was a big problem that the Buddhist practitioners were facing as to keep their Buddhism alive. So many of the monasteries closed down, and along with their scrolls, they all went off to Tibet via Nepal. So they all went to Tibet. But a large part of the householders, people living, the common man who were actually practicing Buddhism and who were also secretly practicing the tantric rites of Buddhism, they didn't know where to go. They didn't know what to do. So there was a gradual, what they did was they slowly started amalgamating with the Vaishnava movements that was slowly spreading after Ramanujacharya's entry. And the Sahajayana Buddhism amalgamated with some elements of Vaishnavism, and a new cult was born, which was called Sahajiya Vaishnava. Sahajiya Vaishnavism. This was the name that was given to that particular understanding of Vaishnavism. Sahajiya Vaishnavism is a huge mixture of Buddhist tantric principles and Vaishnavite ideology. Now, slowly this began to be called Sahajiya Vaishnava Tantra. They started calling it Sahajiya Vaishnava Tantra because there were a lot of Buddhist tantric principles which were included in this entire, ideology here. Now, in the care of time, I will not really go into the depths of the idea of Sahajayana Buddhism, but we will just look at some important elements here for us to understand. On one side was the deep impact of Kashmiri Shaivism. Now, this was a period where the Vedic idea was being rejected. The Vedic idea was being rejected. The Kashmiri Shaivism principles were more inclined to accept the philosophies of Sankhya, the Sankhya philosophies. What is that? We will come to it in a little while. Jayadeva was in the midst of this entire activity. So he was positioned in the middle of this entire activity. Arupa, yes, Bowls of Bengal is complete Sahajiya Vaishnava Tantra. Yes, you're absolutely right. So now in the midst of this activity, there were two people who took up this very, very seriously. One was Jayadeva Kavi and the other was Chandidasa of Bengal. Now Chandidasa there are 3 Chandidasas. So we are talking about what they call the Bodo Chandidasa or the big Chandidas. Now he and Jayadeva are considered to be Adi Gurus of Sahajiya Vaishnavism. So taking from this principle, we can easily infer that Jayadeva's entire outlook or ideology was based one side on Sahajiya Vaishnava ideology, and on the other side, the influences of the Shakta Tantra and Kashmiri Shaivism. These two impacts we will see in the work, and we will prove it. We will prove through the text how these things work on Gita Govindam. So this is the basic background of where Jayadeva is coming from at that point of time. So when we talk about the Buddhavatara of Pralayapayodhi Jale, the very first Ashtapadi, we are talking about Gautama Buddha. We are not talking there about Purana Buddha. Because the principle that the Vaishnavas very cleverly adopted was all the Buddhists who came into the Vaishnava pantheon, they accepted the Dashavatara principle and they inserted Buddha as one of the Dashavataras, so that they could reconcile, their beliefs as well as the Hindu beliefs or the Vaishnava beliefs that were prevalent at that time. So they brought in Buddha and made him one of the avatars of Vishnu itself. So this was a phenomenon that happened historically. This is a very possible phenomenon. We can see many songs in Bengal Vaishnavism where Buddha is referred to as Vishnu. And in the Sahajiya songs also, you will see, because the cults of Varaha, the cults of Dashavataras was already very strongly prevalent in Orissa at that time. They had what is called the Dashavatara cults. So this Dashavatara worship, Varaha worship, and some of these ideals were seamlessly, they call their cultural traditions, all their ideas, and they incorporated it into the ideology itself. And they started creating songs where Buddha became one of the avatars of Vishnu. So when we talk about Nindati Yajna Vidhe Raha Shruti Jatam, we are talking about Gautama Buddha, undoubtedly over there. So taking this into consideration, now we will see how this whole idea developed. So this is the background. Jayadeva being the Adi Guru of Sahajiya Vaishnava Tantra on one side. Now there are many scholars who have fought about this. And they said, yes, Jayadeva is an Adi Guru of Sahajiya Vaishnavism. He did believe it. But Sahajiya Vaishnava principles do not reflect in the Gita Govindam. That he has avoided using these principles in the Gita Govindam. Now, I beg to differ. I don't think anybody who is so invested in a certain ideology that he can be called the Adi Guru will keep his ideology out of his only work, only important work. I don't think he will do that. Definitely, Sahajiya Vaishnavism is hidden very, emphatically within the text of the Gita Govindam. But he did not bring it out openly because there was a lot of opposition to the idea of Tantra. And there is still, we still have a very, negative connotation to the concept of Tantra. We think it is too raw, that it has too much sexual connotation. So we think of Tantra like that. So because of that, we would like to not look at the Tantra, and we'd like to look at the more comfortable, aspects of love. So we don't want to look at the raw and virile aspects of love. We would like to look at the more comfortable aspects. So I have no intention of looking at the comfortable aspects. So let's look at the most interesting aspect of this whole thing is how Jayadeva has resolved the tension between Tantra and Bhakti Vedanta. How he has used these two principles and resolved the tension between this idea. So that is what is interesting here. So now that we have established that there is Sahajayana, now let us look at one aspect which I wanted to discuss. What is The idea of Radha. What is the idea of Radha? Where and how where do we see Radha? Now, Radha is a very elusive character. We don't find her much mentioned in the Puranas. Wherever we do find her mentioned in the Puranas, the thing is, it is very difficult to date. We don't know the dates of those Puranas. Those Puranas that have mentioned Radha very in detail, some of them are attributed to post Jayadeva time. So by then, Jayadeva had already established Radha as a major deity of worship. So if these Puranas have come after Jayadeva, they are basically influenced by Jayadeva. If they have come before Jayadeva, then that is interesting because Jayadeva would have been influenced by them in some way or the other. The Bhagavata Puran does not mention Radha by name. It only mentions one beloved Sakhi of Krishna. And they use the word Aradhya. So she is one for whom Krishna is an Aradhya. From the word Aradhya itself, Radha could have developed from that word. So that is one aspect Bhagavata Puran doesn't mention. But, we can see several Puranas later, like the Brahmavaivartya Purana, mentioning Radha in great detail. And it calls her the form of the Pancha Pranas. Brahmavaivartya Purana calls Radha Panchamim Varnayamite. So she is the form of the 5 breaths, he says, the Pancha Prana. He calls her the Rasa Mandala Sambhuta, one who is in charge of the Rasa Mandala, one who glows in the midst of the Rasa Mandala. That is how the Brahmavaivarta Puranam has mentioned her. Now, in the first well-dated work, which we know that this is this century, is the Gita Govindam, in which Radha is mentioned in great detail. But in popular lore, in the lore of Bengal and in Orissa, there are references to Radha Krishna almost way back to the 8th century. Maybe even around before 1130, at least, before the period of, what you're thinking Jayadeva is. So in a Sanskrit anthology called the Subhashita Ratna Kosha by the Bengali poet Dimboka, we find a statement he makes saying that the city folk have woken up and the pilgrims in the street are singing in clear voices about the holy love of Krishna and Radha. So he mentions that this is a work which comes before Jayadeva Kavi. And then you find there are Pala sculptures of Radha and Krishna in a place called Pahadpur, where you find like an Ardhanarishwara sculpture, you find Radha Krishna as Ardhanari. So you find those kind of sculptures much earlier. So there are many, many references to Radha. I will not go into those details right now. We will discuss them a little later if we have time as to, the Puranas which came after Gita Govindam, how many ways they have discussed. And there are Upanishadic works also like the Gopala Tapini Upanishad and many works like this which talk about Radha, even though they don't mention the word Radha. So it's the Upanishad itself says Gopala Tapini Upanishad. So somebody who is in Tapana for Krishna. So that itself, tells us, and in that he doesn't call her by name, but there are several references to Radha. But the first place you actually see Radha being established, which you can date, is the Gita Govindam. So now let us come to the next principle, that is the vortex. Now, what is the idea behind the vortex? Just a second. So I'll take a few seconds like this every time because this is all in multiple books. So please don't mind. Now, 3 sections we see in the Gita Govindam. 12 chapters or 12 divisions, 24 songs, 72 shlokas. 72 shlokas is the official number of shlokas that you find if you add all the shlokas before the songs and after the songs. Other than these 72 shlokas, there are standalone sections which are called Mangala Shasanas. This is not included in Barbara Stoller Miller and some of the translations of the Gita Govindam. These Mangala Shasana sections are you only find in the Brindavan, translations of the Gita Govindam. Now, these Mangala Shasanas are very, very interesting. We'll discuss them as we proceed because they link one canto and the other so beautifully. I don't understand why they have not been included in some of the major translations. It gives you the entire tattva of the idea, and it also justifies the whole assumption that this is not just a poetic work, that this is a prayer paddhati. So it justifies that because there is a very famous saying even in Sanskrit that Adi, Madhya and Antya, every ritual or every aspect must have Mangala Shasanas. It should have Mangala Shasana. It should have constantly, there should be reference to Mangala for a yajna that is undertaken for the good of the universe. So there should be constant Mangala Vachana. You find that in the Gita Govindam at every section. So these are called the subsections or the sub-prabandha parts of the Gita Govindam. Now the number 3, 6 and 9. Now we hear of this actually, the vortex idea, because all of us have heard what Tesla has said about it, So he says that if you only knew the magnificence of 3, 6 and 9, then you would have the key to the universe, he says. So this is said by Tesla, but much before Tesla was ever born or, thought of or imagined, our systems had already given us the key to this vortex idea. Now, what is vortex? This 1 to 9 is a system of numbers that explains the essence of the form of a sphere. Now, please remember all your Sanskrit and your classes and everything. Constantly, we're talking about Earth being elliptical, Earth being spherical in nature, or the cosmos being spherical in nature. So we are constantly talking about Hiranyagarbha, the Andanda, Pindanda, Brahmanda. All these ideas are elliptical, spherical in nature. So the shape of the cosmos or the shape of the truth basically is considered to be spherical. It's considered to be elliptical in nature. Now, inside this ellipse, now even if you look at Vedic mathematics, if you draw a sphere and you put numbers, 1 to 9 around the sphere, 0 is the number inside, and 1 to 9 is along the perimeter of that 0. Now, when you link the multiples, it's all multiples of 2 that you link. So 1 into 2, 2, 2 into 2, then 4. Then you keep coming to that and there is no double digit. So you will get 2, 4, and then the moment you come to 14, it will become 7. The moment you come to, the moment you come to 14, it will become 5. The moment you come to 16, it will become 7. So now I don't have time to show you the whole diagram, but I'm just trying to tell you that within the sphere, when you start linking the numbers this way, in the center of the sphere, you will get something that looks like that meta symbol you're seeing today, the infinity symbol. You will get a cross symbol like that. That is called the vortex. That keeps linking the whole idea. And sorry, that's not the vortex. That is the movement idea there. Now there are three numbers that don't get linked: 3, 6, and 9. This 3, 6, and 9 forms a triangle with an open end in the middle of the sphere. These 3, 6, and 9 are supposed to be the touch points of all the energy centers, because they don't link to the internal movement that is happening within the sphere. Okay, did I lose everybody? Or are you still here with me? So here what happens is, now that much is enough for now. We'll talk about the idea here, that it is considered to be the deepest structure in the universe. The sphere with its vortex and with its infinity symbol to show the movement of energy. Now, when you look at the concept, how does it happen? According to the Vedic principle, I mean, if you look at how the vortex idea unfolds, you will understand this better when I explain Matrika Chakra next. The elements go from down to up here. So 1 to 9, if we take, 1 is earth, 2 will be water, 3 will be fire, 4 will be air, 5 will be ether, 6 is manas or mind, the mind space, 7 is intelligence or understanding, 8 is false ego, ahankara, 9 is the soul. So let us put all the others aside and let us just look at 3, 6, and 9. So 3 is fire, 6 is manas, 9 is the soul. Now this soul is the human soul or the visible soul who is present in matter. This soul is not the transcendental or the para soul. The transcendental para soul is 0. That is the main soul, the master soul, the soul of all souls. That would be 0. So if you look at 3, 6, and 9 as an idea, 3 is fire. 3 is fire. That means 3 is the testing point. So when we say 3 is the testing point, 3 is the acharya. 3 is the guru. In the case of the Gita Govindam, this role is played by the Sakhi. So the 3 is acharya. Now look at the idea here. What is it that gives us 3? The 12 chapters give us 3. What are the 12 chapters? They are guidelines. They are pointers. Because they are only the titles. Samoda Damodara, Aklesha Keshava. What are the titles saying to you? They are saying that I am guiding you into this section, which is the content of this section is this. So the 12 names are guides for us to enter into that particular chapter. So the 12 is the acharya, the 3 is the acharya, which is played by the Sakhi. 6 is the manas, 6 is Radha. 6 is Radha here. All the different ideas connected to the manas, the mind, the heart, and the moon. Connected to all this, you find in 6. So the 6 we get through the 24 songs. Now just think carefully. The 24 songs are all deeply emotional, pouring out the anguish, the love, the passions that occur in the minds of Radha and Krishna. So it is mind matter that you see. 9 is the mortal soul in the form of Krishna there. 9 is also the tattva or the essence behind what the text is all about. So everything philosophical, the entire import, the content, the meaning, the message that is contained in the Gita Govindam, you will find in the 72 shlokas, not in the 24 songs. The entire import will be available in the 72 shlokas. That is 9. That is the 9 idea. So this is how the idea of the vortex connects here. On top of all this is the 0, which is the para, which is the main soul. So now the whole intent is that from 0, Krishna has to be brought down to 9. And from 9, then the activity of 6 combined with the activity of 3 has to unfold. And that is how this whole game or this Leela of love will begin in the Gita Govindam. So that is the principle on which it is based. Okay, now we have to keep little track of time also. Okay, all right, not bad. So now let us look at the, now are you with me so far? Is this clear? You get the idea? Okay. So now this whole thing that we talk about now, the Fibonacci sequence, Katapayadi, this is all based on this principle only. The 1 to 9 principle. These 1 to 9 are called the 10 emanations. Does it sound familiar? 10 emanations is equal to Dashavatara. Now this Dashavatara, 10 because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There is no 10. 10 will become 0 again. So if you see, 9 becomes the primary principle of all God idea. 9 with the 0 hovering above. Now, if you see Norse mythology, if you see Mayan, if you see pyramids, if you see any of these ideas, universal architectural idea, diameters, everything is connected to the number 9. For example, a small example. If you calculate the diameters of the sun, moon, and earth using the decimal parity, the moon is 2,160 miles. Add it. 2160 is equal to 9. The sun is 8,64,000 miles diametrically. 864 is equal to 18 is equal to 9. The earth is 7,920 miles. 7 plus 9 plus 2 is equal to 18 is equal to 9. So you see how crazy this is. You know how mad. So that is why the statement that Tesla makes is the mathematical fingerprint of God is 9, he says. So that seems to be the idea here. And that is what is reflected in the Mandukya Upanishad when he says Purnamidam, Purnamida, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudaccha. That is the idea. That Purna is connected to the 0 and 9 principle. So you have dark matter initially. Now this Big Bang, everything leads to this idea. You have dark matter. Journey from darkness to light is the template of the universe. The journey from darkness to light. 369 do not connect to the base because it's a vector. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 is the third dimension, which keeps on oscillating between 3 and 6, which is the fourth dimension. So this highest dimension of the magnetic field that you see, this actually the electrical engineers will understand very well. You know, the highest magnetic dimension will always occur in 3 combinations of 3, 6, and 9. So it's an intensely powerful magnetic field that we're talking about, this combination. And we always look at life as binaries. You know, we say Ardhanarishwara is male and there is female. We are always looking at it as a binary idea. But here, it is not actually a binary. It is a triad. You have the male, you have the female, and you have that part which links the male and the female. So if you look at the idea of yin and yang, one side is this curve, one side is this curve. That S that forms in the middle is the third component. That S is the dangerous point. Why? Let me tell you quickly why that is a dangerous point. This is where scholars have fought. Philosophers have fought. If they have decided that it should be binary, there should be only two ideas. The moment you admit a third entity, you have to admit a relationship between the third and the one, the third and the two. You have to admit that also. If you admit that, you have to admit the fact that there could be multiple relationships. That there could be multiple relationships here. So that is why they rejected this binary idea. But we find the triad idea very clearly in the Gita Govindam. Because you admit the third principle, the link principle, as the Sakhi. So if you admit one Sakhi, you have to admit multiple Sakhis. Which is why the idea of the Sakhi itself is the idea of multiples. It's the idea of multiples. There is one hero, Nayaka, there is one Nayika, there can be multiple Sakhis. All these multiple Sakhis can be saying the same thing. They can all be doing the same actions. They can be doing the same movements because it is one collective voice. It is one collective voice that is desperate to unite principle 1 and principle 2. That is the whole idea behind this. That they are desperate to unite these two. So the Sakhi is the voice of the audience also. You want Radha and Krishna to unite. So they are actually representatives of your own voice there. So that is why they did not admit the third principle. Because if you admit one, you have to admit all. But the Krishna Bhakti poets had no such qualms. They said, everyone come and let us all try to unite Radha and Krishna. Let us all do it as a collective effort. So they admitted everyone into the Zoom session. So they admitted all. And they said, okay, all of us are on camera now. We all have to do this together. So the third principle was admitted into the idea. So this is actually a triad. Now, if we look at the idea of the triad, 0 is heaven or 0 is the para. The descent of the energies from top to the earth is the vortex. So if you see some images, you will see the sleeping Vishnu with the, from the navel, that Padma will be coming, and it will be like an ellipse. You will see that there is an elliptical pattern where it is going. That is the vortex actually. So the triangular journey of the para to the earth is the vortex. Earth is represented by square. So when Kapila Vatsya and others have written about squaring the circle, that's what they mean. What is the meaning of squaring the circle? Circle is the heaven. Earth is the square. Squaring the circle means how to resolve cosmic energies and understand them from the earthly point of view. That is the idea of squaring the circle. So from there it has come, the principle. So taking all this into account, now let us see what and why the vortex is important here for us to understand now right from the very first shlokam. So why did he even include this idea? Why did Jayadeva even include this idea? What could have influenced him to include this entire concept? So as I said, the vortex is about the journey from the dark to the light. Now for this, we have to understand two principles. We will first understand it from the Matrika Chakra point of view, and then we will look at the theories that formed after Jayadeva, which took completely from Jayadeva's principles. There were two theories. One was Shuddha Dvaita of Vallabhacharya, and one was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Achintya Bheda Bheda. These two are very important for us to actually backtrack later and understand the Gita Govindam.
Can you just repeat that, Anu, if you don't mind, please?
Yeah, the two principles are Vallabhacharya's Shuddha Advaita and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Achintya Bheda Bheda. These two principles evolved with the influence of Jayadeva's ideas, Jayadeva's thoughts. Now, very briefly, without any confusion here, let's understand quickly why I want to discuss Matrika Chakra. Now, the reason for it is this. Just give me 1 second. Like this, I'll suddenly stop in the middle. Don't mind. Because I have to go to that particular document. So 1 second. Yeah. Yeah. So here we established one thing. One is the Dashama Skandha of the Bhagavata Purana. I'll go to that when we actually start the work. The 12th century being a period of intense tantric rituals and practices, the Kashmiri Shaivite Sankhya philosophies. Sankhya is about dual manifestation. I think many of you would be aware of that. It is about the concept of Purusha Prakriti, Shiva Shakti. So this whole duality idea is brought out in Sankhya. Now, in this, when we look at the duality idea, it is always about the originating principle, which is the Purusha, and the Shakti Chalana principle, or the principle that actually gives life and power to this originating principle. The ordering principle, which is the feminine, which is a Shakti idea. This is a Sankhya concept. Now, Sankhya was what influenced Kashmiri Shaivism, the idea of Kashmiri Shaivism. And this was a strong period of Kashmir Shaivism. So Jayadeva was deeply influenced by the idea of the Sankhya and Kashmiri principle. So the manifestation of universe in the forms of Purusha Prakriti, they provided a theoretical basis for these tantric rituals that were taking place at that time. Plus the Vajrayana and Sahajayana Buddhist practices added to the whole thing. So this is the background of the whole idea. So the principle on which Kashmiri Shaivism, this journey from darkness to light, is based on a very interesting principle which is called Matrika Chakra. Matrika Chakra is actually the theory of the alphabet. The 51 letters of Sanskrit, it is based on that idea. And we find it reflected in the very first shloka of the Gita Govindam. Now, just very briefly, I'll mention the principle here. From the point of view of Kashmiri Shaivism, Lord Shiva creates the universe. Okay, accepted fact. In his own self. That is, it's an image of himself. Yeah, and the reflection also would be an image of himself. So Shiva's own nature exists. Now, if he wants to project this onto the earth, it has to be a reflection of himself. Now, the idea here is not a reflection like when you look into a mirror, you are external to the mirror. This is not how the idea of reflection is analyzed in this philosophy. The idea is analyzed as the mirrors. It's like two cups being placed in front of each other. So if this is the Shiva principle, the mirror will reflect the principle in reverse, like a cup. Two cups placed against each other. That is how they have conceived the reflection of Shiva. So in the Shiva principle, if there are 36 tattvas, which Kashmiri Shaivism talks about. So in the 36, if from Shiva, Ishvara, Sadashiva, from there, if the principles come and the last principle is the earth, in the reflection, the first principle will be the earth And from earth, it will go upwards to to Ishvara. So that is how the whole system will work. So when we look at this idea, the universe is contained in this 36 tattvas. The descent has to be from Shiva, Shakti, Sadashiva, Ishvara, Shuddha Vidya, Maya. So this is we will not go into 36 principles right now. But what is important is that the Panchabhutas and all, as you're coming down, the last principle will be earth. And then you will have all the earthly Prakriti, principles like intellect, manas, and all these ideas. So all these are part of the 36 tattvas. So now the reflection is Prithvi to Shakti, to Shiva. That will be the reflection idea. So even though the real way is from Shiva onwards, the reflection makes you feel that the lowest element, which is the earth, is reflected first. Because it is a reflection. It is not the original. It's not the truth. So Lord Shiva's energies have Chit Shakti, the energy of consciousness. It has Ananda Shakti, the energy of bliss. It has Ichha Shakti, the energy of will. Now, Ichha is not desire here. It's not desire, it is will. You have Jnana Shakti, which is the energy of knowledge. And you have Kriya Shakti, which is the energy of action. I just repeat. Chit Shakti, energy of consciousness. Ananda Shakti, energy of bliss. Ichha Shakti, energy of will. Jnana Shakti, energy of knowledge. And Kriya Shakti, energy of action. These are 5 Shaktis, 5 energies, which are contained within the 16 vowels of Sanskrit. That is A to Aha. Okay, between A and Aha, these 5 ideas are present. A is Chit Shakti. A is Ananda. Now, Chit and Ananda are inseparable. I is Ichha. Now, when it is unagitated, it is I. When this Ichha becomes agitated, it is E. Okay. Now, these unagitated ones peacefully resides in its own nature. Now, when it is agitated, it doesn't separate from its nature, but there is an apprehension of moving forward or losing one's own nature. So when the Jnana Shakti enters, there is apprehension. That apprehension is brought in through the idea of U and U. That is Unmesha. The idea of Unmesha comes from U. That is the knowledge that existence is now going to begin. This is the idea. It is not yet begun, but it's forthcoming. That creation is now going to take place. Is reflected in Unmesha. Now, when Shiva begins to create, okay, he becomes very apprehensive. This apprehension is called Unata. This Unata it means lessening or depletion. So here he feels that his Chit and his Ananda Shakti may deplete if he starts this action of creating. And this fear keeps Shiva still, constant. It keeps him unmoving. And suddenly what he does, he discards the universe, separates it from his nature, and he goes into a cocoon of his own Chit and Ananda Shakti. That withdrawal is Ru, Ru, Lu, Lu. Because it is a withdrawal. They are not used very often, those aksharas. Those letters are not used often. So the R and the L are the withdrawal ideas. Now these 4 vowels represent what is called Anashrita Shiva, or one who has not accepted the existence of the universe in his own nature. Because he is scared. You will understand this whole thing when I talk about Meghair Meduram Ambaram, because he's talking about the scared Krishna there. Okay, so that is how the whole thing will connect. Now the Chit and the Ananda Shaktis, they do not recognize this apprehension of Shiva. They don't understand this. And they know that to create the universe is his glory. He has to do it. That is his work. He has to do this. So there should be no apprehension in Shiva, according to them. So coming out or going in, everything should be same to Shiva. It should not affect his nature, his true nature. So they believe in this. So Chit and Ananda, with this understanding, they begin to create the universe, keeping Shiva there, as an important factor to provide the energy. So A and A come into contact with E and E, and they come up with A. Now, both contact A, so that's why it gives A and I, or I. Both ideas will come. Now, Chit and Jnana Shakti contact U and U, and they create O. So, O, and because both are contacting, O and Au, both are created. So, these four letters, A, I, O, Au, which were created with the contact of Chit Shakti and Ananda Shakti with Ichha and Jnana Shakti, represent the four stages of Kriya. Got it? You will go and look at this video again. You look at this video again and you will understand the whole concept. See the first word of Gita Govinda, Me Ghair. A, I. That's the principle there. That is the first principle there. So A, I is the Ichha Shakti. It's starting the idea to create the universe. So that is why we are discussing this. This is not a superfluous discussion. We are discussing to enter into the Gita Govindam. Now, so this Kriya Shakti is born through I and Au, and the energy or the action of Shiva now has to become, first it is not clear, it is called Asputa. It becomes clear, that becomes Sputa. Then it becomes clearer, it's called Sputatara. It becomes even more vivid and clear, that's Sputatama. This is represented by I and Au. Now, in this energy of action, the reflection of the whole universe takes place. It is this point that the whole reflection starts taking place. Now, even though the nature is created, universe is being created, or Prakriti is the whole idea is being created, Shiva's nature, which is full of consciousness, that is his self, this nature has not altered. He's still residing within his own point, within his own idea. He has not moved from the nature. So he's in a bindu. That bindu is That is the circle Now, when the starts gradually reflecting Shakti, then you have the Shiva bindu and the Shakti bindu, which becomes Aha. So you get the Aha idea there, which is the last syllable of the Shiva Tattvas. So A to Aha is Shiva Tattva. From Ka till the last now consonant are called the Shakti Tattvas. Now, the moment Shiva creates the universe and Prakriti is born, now everything is pervaded by Shakti Tattva after that. So from Ka onwards, you get Shakti. Shakti is the main force that happens. So Ka till Yara Lava Shesha Saha, till you go there, all these are called Shakti. The consonants are all Shakti Tattva. So the remainder of the alphabet is Shakti Tattva, and it's a reflection of the Swatantriya. It is not really created, but it just appears to be created. So in Chit, Ananda, Ichha and Jnana Shaktis and Kriya, the Swatantra of Shiva is reflected, and no element on the universe escapes these five energies. Nothing escapes these five energies. After that, you have the rest of the Akshara thing, which we will not discuss. It is sufficient for us to understand that the rest of it is now starts the Shakti's work. Now, as the descent happens from Para to lower and lower realms, Prakriti starts becoming more and more powerful and strong. So that is why from Vaikuntha, when the transition happens to Goloka, and from Goloka, when it happens to the Brindavana, which is on earth, by the time it comes to Brindavana, it is completely Naika Tattva. It's completely feminine based. So Vaikuntha has Purusha Tattva. It has Narayana is predominant there. Aishwarya is the quality. Aishwarya is the Tattva that is prevalent in Vaikuntha. When you come to the Goloka, there is an eternal dance. It's like the Trishanku Swarga. You know, between the heaven and between the earth, there is this eternal dance between Shiva Shakti when the transition is happening. From that point, when it touches ground zero, when it touches the ground, the female principle kicks in. And so, Brindavana is completely Naika Bhava oriented, and the quality is Madhurya. So whatever this Madhura Bhakti that we keep talking about, that is where the base comes from. That is how the whole idea comes in. So it is Madhura based. Okay. So this is enough about Matrika Chakra. So when we apply it now to the text, we will understand what the whole thing is about. Now let me quickly read to you how this principle taking from Jayadeva became the principle. It is actually a Shiva Shakti principle. It just transferred onto Radha Krishna. Completely, verbatim, the whole idea transferred onto Radha Krishna. Because of Jayadeva. It happened because of Jayadeva's way in which he handled the whole thing. So taking from Jayadeva, Vallabhacharya, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and others crystallized the Krishna Bhakti movements, which is the Bhakti Vedanta schools. So here, one or two things only I will tell you so that you will understand how, you know, how it became Krishna Bhakti, how the whole Shiva Shakti principle transferred and became Krishna, Radha Krishna principle. Now here, when you look at Vallabhacharya Shuddha Dvaita, he says, he calls it, you know, Avikruta Parinama Vada. That is the theory of an entity expressing itself really as an effect without itself undergoing change. Isn't this exactly what we spoke about in the Kashmiri idea? That he expresses the reality, but he will not change himself. Brahman is spirit. He defies the logic of the world. He is the meeting ground of all contradiction. These are some of the principles of Shuddha Advaita. Now he says there is Tirobhava and there is Avirbhava. Tirobhava is when you conceal your qualities. Avirbhava is when you reveal your qualities. Now, because Krishna is the only avatara which came with full understanding that he is God. That is the only avatara that comes with a full understanding that he is Narayana or he is God. So constantly he's playing the role of Tirobhava and Avirbhava. He is walking amongst Brindavan, amongst all these young, you know, Gopas and Gopikas. That is where he's committing Tirobhava. He's concealing his true nature. When he reveals the cosmos in his mouth, when he reveals the Vishwarupam to selected people, that is when he's committing Avirbhava. So he's showing them his true self at that point. So there is a constant Shiva principle. Shiva does exactly that in the Tirobhava Avirbhava idea. That same principle has been juxtaposed and put onto Krishna. So this is again from Shuddha Advaita. Then you have the idea of Achintya Bheda Bheda, which comes from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's school. So there is one Supreme Bhagavan. Yes, that is the idea taken from the Bhagavata Puran. Shakti is identical, at the same time different from the Shakti Mat or the primary source, who is Shiva or Krishna here. Now, it is because of this difference that at the time of transformation of Shakti into multiple things, it does not actually affect the Shaktimat. It does not affect the primary principle, which is Shiva. Are you seeing the similarities between the ideas? So here they give birth to the idea that there are threefold Shaktis of Krishna. The Swarupa Shakti, who is the innate potency of the Lord. This Swarupa Shakti becomes Radha. She is named his Hladini Shakti, or Shakti who creates Ananda or who creates bliss. Then you have the Tatastha or the Jiva Shakti. Now this is an interesting play because in order to activate the Shaktimat, the Shakti is important. So the Shakti activates him, then he comes into activity, he comes into Kriya. Once he comes into Kriya, the Shakti has to now take on all the 24 tattvas, of all the 24 kalas of Prakriti, of human life. That is why you see that she becomes a Jiva suddenly. And then she starts experiencing all, doubts, pains, anguish, and all these things. Now, again, this man has to come and reconvert her back into the primordial principle of Shakti. This is what you see throughout the Gita Govindam. Because there are only 3 Vaks of Krishna in Gita Govindam. There are only 3 songs in which Krishna's voice is there. All these 3 songs are very important for us to understand this conversion principle. First when he's, okay, let me not give that away. We'll go to that when we come to that. So here you have the principle of Swarupa Shakti and Hladini Shakti. Then you have the idea of Goloka as the supreme abode. Now, this is the idea taken from the Bhagavata Purana of Rasa Leela, and this is what Jayadeva has also followed. Krishna's dance with Radha in Goloka is eternal with his Swarupa Shakti. This is happening in the transcendental world. The energy of bliss or Hladini, this is the only energy that is in direct communication with him. Nobody else can communicate directly with Krishna. Only Radha can communicate directly. Radha, who is the Swarupa Shakti, she multiplies herself into thousands of gopis. It is a Hladini or the Swarupa Shakti that keeps multiplying itself. But the core principle is Radha, and only she can be in direct contact with Krishna. The idea is complete self-effacement. Radha and gopis have no thought of self. They have no thought of themselves. They exhibit complete self-effacement, and through service to Krishna, they approach Krishna in the attitude of what is called Mahabhava. That is why the dance is called Maharas. So they approach in the idea of Mahabhava, that is total and complete surrender or complete sentiment of love. Because of this surrender, the joy of surrender is called the Prema Bhakti or the Bhava Bhakti. This exuberance of joy takes form as the Rasa Mandala, or what is called the choral dances of Radha and Krishna, surrounded by countless gopis dancing with Krishna counterparts. Now, Goloka, known as Vrindavan or Mahavaikuntha, is a transcendental abode of Krishna. This is called Shuddha Sattva, the area of pure bliss. And the representation of this is shown in the Rasa Mandala. Which is nothing but the Sri Chakra. The Rasa Mandala is a representation of the Sri Chakra, or it is the micro aspect of the macro, which is the universe. The universe which has the sphere, the vortex, okay, the triangle. Just remember how the Sri Chakra looks. You have the sphere, you have the vortex, and you have the entire, the amalgamation of the different energy points. That is the representation of the cosmos. That representation, when it comes to the earth on the Bhumi, it is represented as the Rasa Mandala, which is the micro representation of the macro idea of cosmos. And in the center of this are the two energies, which apparently look as two but are one combined energy, Radha and Krishna. That is the principle of Achintya Bheda Bheda. So why does he call it Achintya Bheda Bheda? Because it's a very, the name is very interesting, because when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asked, see, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is just a mad mendicant. He never sat and wrote books and said, okay, my principle is called Achintya Bheda Bheda. He just danced and sang in ecstasy. And it's only his followers who codified what he wrote and said, okay, this is what this is. So he says, they asked, Krishnadasa Kaviraja and later poets, later people who followed Nityananda and others who followed Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they asked him, what is Bheda Bheda? It's either Bheda or it's Abheda. What is Bheda Bheda? So they said that it is Bheda, but it is Abheda. Because they are two different principles combined into one principle. And they said, we don't understand. They said, that is why it is Achintya. Because it is not meant to be understood. It is not meant to be understood through Chintana or through thought. That is why they named it Achintya Bheda Bheda. You're not supposed to understand it. You're only supposed to experience the idea. So that was the principle on which the whole idea is based. Now let us look at the first entry point of the Gita Govindam. We will look at Meghair Meduram Ambaram, the very first shloka. So is it okay till here? All the various principles, are they converging in your mind? Yes. So one second. Now, if we look at Meghair Meduram Ambaram Vana Bhuvaha Shyamas Tamala Drumair Naktam Bhirurayam Tvam Eva Tad Imam Radhe Gruham Prapaya Itham Nanda Nideshatas. Now this Nanda is the danger here. The Nanda is not Nanda as in the father of Krishna. Nanda here is the Ananda principle. That is why Matrika Chakra. Ananda is telling them to move now. I is telling them to move ahead as an idea. Chalitayoho Pratyadhava Kunja Drumam Radha Madhavayor Jayanti Yamuna Kule Raha Kelaya. First slokam. Now it says, O Radha, there are threatening clouds which devour the sky. Blackish tamala trees cast the forest into darkness. Damodara is naturally timid. Now, isn't that a contrast? Like, why will God himself be timid? Damodara is naturally timid and cannot be alone in the darkness at night. So take him home with you. Bewildered by intense joy as she turned toward the bower of the trees of desire beside the forest path, Sri Radha honored these words. She reached the bank of the Yamuna and in a secret place, she initiated the love play. Triumph to Radha Madhava's confidential pastimes. May the sweetness come alive in the hearts of the devotees. This is the basic meaning of Meghair. I think half of it now you have understood. You know, when we look at the idea of the principle. So A and I, May Ghair. It starts with the two principles of Ichcha Shakti. Now, all dark things are mentioned. You see the whole pattern first is of darkness. Meghas, which are dark. Tamala trees cast dark shadows. Yamuna is a dark river. There is the fear of darkness in Krishna. So first you are establishing the principle of darkness there. Everything around is dark. Darkness is equals to inertia. Darkness is equals to non-awakening, non-desire for kriya. You don't want to indulge in any kriya. You don't want to, start any creation. You don't want to get into that. That is why he says Damodara is timid. It is the same idea that we take from the Shakta Kashmiri principle of Shiva being reluctant to start the action of creation. So here he is reluctant. So that is why Ananda is telling the Shakti principle, lead him out of this darkness, take him out from here. So that is why he says, Nanda Nideshitaya. So this Nanda has been debated till the cows come home by different scholars. So some people said it is actually Nanda is the Sakhi, Nanda is this, Nanda is that, but actually Nanda is Ananda. There could be other interpretations, but when you look at the whole texture, this looks most probable. So Nanda is Nidesha. He's saying, Ananda is telling this Ichha Shakti, come on, now kickstart the Kriya Shakti. Let this happen. Let you people move out of this darkness. And so they start walking. And here, slowly, they are entering this place. Now, this Kunjavana that they are entering, the male and the female principal are entering that Kunjavana because that is going to be what is called the Rasasthali, or the area where the activity, that means they are entering the whole pavilion where the creation will begin. And that is why there is a hint that very clearly that they entered this and they united. That Radha and Krishna united there. Only with the unity of the Shakti and the Purusha Prakriti principle, only creation can kickstart. Na? So that is why she says Radha took him into the Kunjavanam, which is the Rasasthali, which is the cosmic idea. And there they united so that the act of creation can begin. And that is why he says Radha Madhavayor Jayanti Yamuna Kule. Now what is Yamuna? Yamuna is dark. Yamuna is the daughter of Yama. Yamuna is an indicator of time. Yamuna is the Samaya principle. She's time. So whenever you say Yamuna is flowing there, it means that time, it talks about time as an idea. That is the principle behind that Gopika Vastrapaharanam idea also. We can talk about that because, okay, I don't want to get diverted there now. So yeah. So the Yamuna is an idea of time. So she reached the bank of Yamuna because the time was now ripe for the Srishti to take place. And then began the confidential pastime between the two of them. Now here, Jayadeva involves the spectator, the listener, the viewer into the whole story and says, you all come into this Kunjadrumam now. Because you have to view this creation, only then it becomes a yajna. If it has to become a yajna, you have to view the whole thing. You have to view the whole activity. So he invites them and says, okay, come, may the sweetness come alive in the hearts of all the devotees. So that is the basic essence of Meghair Meduram Ambaram. Now after that, so this introduces you right at the beginning of the work to the metaphysics of the Gita Govindam. It's bringing you directly into Achintya Bheda Bheda, into the tantric Kashmiri Shaivism principle into the Matrika Chakra idea. It's directly introducing you to the metaphysics of the Gita Govindam and says, okay, this is the principle on which I'm going to operate from now. So it directly leads you there, the very first shloka. So for those of you who have seen the video, that's why I said, while Megha Medira Mambaram introduces us to the metaphysics of the principle. So that's why I said that. So is this clear? How Megha Medira Mambaram becomes the metaphysical principle of the Gita Govindam. Now, when it moves forward, now what he does, it is a prabandha work. This is not a text. Okay, this is a poem. This is a love poem. Now, in our love poem, you have to set several premises. One, you have to have verses which eulogize the different gods and goddesses, like the Mangala Charanas. You have to have these premises. Now, for these premises, he talks about Vagdevata Charita. He talks about Saraswati here. And he says, you know, that which is designed by the Vagdevata, you know, this work is that. And he calls himself here Padmavati Charana Charana Chakravarti in the next shloka. Now, this is also a debatable issue. Lot of people say Padmavati was his wife, that she was a Devadasi and he was married to Padmavati, and both of them were a pair. This is the common idea. Now, some scholars say Jayadeva didn't refer to Padmavati, a human being, but Padmavati as in Lakshmi. That he says, I am Padmavati's Charana Charana Chakravarti. Whatever it may. But if you look at the idea of Sahajiya Vaishnava Tantra, it was very common that practitioners of Tantric Sahajiya Vaishnavism would have a female partner. It was a very common principle. And decorating and dressing up that female partner was a very much important part of that Tantric ritual. You will find that in the 24th song. In the last Ashtapadi, Krishnadasa Kaviraja writes about the whole idea that there were two women, two Devadasis, whom Krishnadasa Kaviraja used to worship as deities. You can find it in Chaitanya Charitamrtam. There are several references in Bengal, you know, Tantra and Sahajiya texts about this whole act. And there are many references to the principle, because what is Tantra? Tantra is basically Shakti worship. Tantra is something that resolves the male and female principle. The idea is always to create a balance between the male and female principle. That is the concept of Tantra. So when you look at Sahajiya or Sahajayana, you will find there is always reference to the white channel, the red channel, and the gold channel. These are the references to the Ida, Pingala, and the Sushumna Nadis. These are reference to that. Now, since we are all mature dancers, let me tell you very clearly that the idea is not just Ida, Pingala, but it is the feminine and masculine idea of blood and semen. It brings us to that principle. This is the principle of the Iktara of the bowls, Arupa. The bowls, when they have the Iktara, you have two strings in the back, one string in the center, which is actually the Tara, which is Krishna. These three are representatives of these three nadis. They all go up and unite and tie themselves to the Krishna principle. That is the idea of the Iktara actually.
How beautiful, Akka.
So because you're a Bengali, you will understand this whole thing.
Yes.
So, you know, so this is the idea of the Nadi. And there are several examples through the songs. We will look at examples of how this references to not just in Jayadeva, but in the later poets of Krishna Bhakti also, there is a reference to red, gold, and, you know, silver. To those colors, there is always this references there. So these are Sahajiya principles. So most likely is Padmavati Charana Charana Chakravarti is a double-edged, it's a double-edged verse. It's a double-edged line where he refers to his own partner Padmavati. And he also says, I'm a servant at the feet of Padmavati Lakshmi. So he's probably using both references here in this idea. And then after he, establishes the idea that, okay, this is a verse that is inspired by Vagdevi, who's Saraswati. This is being recited by Padmavati Charana Charana Chakravarti. And then he also establishes the idea that Etam Karoti Jayadeva Kavi Prabandham. So he says, mine is a Prabandha work. So it's a poetic work. And Jayadeva took a lot of poetic license. He completely changed and transformed the Krishna of the Bhagavata Puran and the Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita. And he brought a Krishna who expresses and cries his anguish out, which was not allowed in the Bhagavata Puran. So he takes that liberty. He says, mine is a Prabandha work, and this is what I'm going to do. And then he talks about one verse in which he mentions all his contemporary poets. This is a highly debated verse, where he mentions different, poets, like he says, there is this, 1 minute, I'll just go to that. He mentions 4 poets here. And he says, there is the poet Umapati Dhara, there is the poet Sharana, there is Govardhanacharya, and there is a poet called Dhoi. He says he's a contemporary of all these poets. Now, another thing which is very clear is the fight between Bengal and Orissa to claim Jayadeva. Okay. Everyone says Jayadeva is their poet. Now, in this fight, this verse is very, very important here, because he says we are all, in the court of Lakshmana Sena of Bengal. So the Bengal, section, they say this is the Kenduli of West Bengal, and that is where Jayadeva comes from. So because all these are the Sena kings, the Lakshmana Sena and all, were ruling Bengal at that time. But the Oriya, scholars have a completely different look, and they say that this verse is an interpolation, that it was not there in the original text. They say that it is impossible. They give some statistics, which I don't want to go into, which is not necessary for us right now. They give some statistics to say that Lakshmana Sena, it was not during the period of Lakshmana Sena that Jayadeva was actually present. So he could not have been a contemporary of Umapati. And they also disproved that Dhoi belonged to the court of Lakshmana Sena. So there is some controversy about this verse. So we'll keep this verse aside. In some texts, this is the 3rd verse. In some texts, this is the 4th verse. Now he expresses his intent in the next verse very clearly. Okay, we are past time, right? We'll just finish this last verse, and then we will from tomorrow, we will start the whole thing. Now, this is the intent of the poet. Yadi harismarane sarasam mano, yadi vilasa kalasu kutuhalam, madhura komalakanta padavalim shunutada Jayadeva Saraswati. So he says, if remembering Hari enriches your heart. Now, this remembering is a very important aspect here. Smarana. Smarana is very important. It plays the 3rd character in Gita Govindam. See the connection between the words Smarana and Smara. Smara is Madana. So basically, Madana is actually Smarana. Madana is a representative of the idea of memory. His memory, actually. So that is why he says, Yadi Harismarane. Constantly remembering, keeping Hari in your memory, if that is your intent. And you enjoy the art of vilasa, or the art of love, or the whole, this kala, if you are excited about it, about this love, Madhura, he calls his Madhura, he calls it Komala. Now all these Madhura, Komala and all these are the gunas of the poetry. So I don't know if Sujata Mohanji is there over here. Sujata Mohanji and all have written a book on the Gita Govindam. So you should all read that book actually to look at it from the point of view of, the Sanskrit, understanding of guna, dosha, riti, auchitya, everything they have handled in that book. So the Madhuratva, the Komalatva, all these are the gunas of poetry. So he says, Madhura Komala Kanta Padavalim Shrunu Tada Jayadeva Saraswati. Listen to this Saraswati of Jayadeva. Listen to this, song of Jayadeva for you to understand two things. One, that the memory of Hari is primary. Two, that this is an art of Vilasa Kala. These two things I want to establish, he says. So he makes that very clear here. And then we go into the Dashavatara, where it is actually the creation that has begun. So if you see the last shlokam of the Dashavatara, we'll do a little of the Dashavatara tomorrow. When we look at that, he will say Dasha Kriti Krite. He didn't say he took the form of Dashavatara. He said he did the Kriya. He did Krita. Through these Dashakritis, he did Kritas. So that is the Kriya Shakti kicking in. So there now he becomes Krishna comes from tamas or inertia. He's coming into the rajas. He comes into the idea of rajas. Once you come into rajas, you are active. You create, you do everything. You come into the concept, you come into the periphery of Kriya Shakti. And from that Kriya, then the next stage it has to go to Sattva. So from Sattva, it will go now through the whole activity of Prakriti will take place till it goes to Harimeka Rasam, where that's the only place where he's called Narayana. So it will slowly go there from that point. So Dashavatara is the Archa or the deity form or the worshipful form of Krishna is being established there as the Lord of the Vibhava. So from Para, he took the vortex, which is the Vyuha. He came down as Vibhava Swarupa, or that which incarnates. And now you have to establish him as the deity of worship. Now this is the first section of the Yajna, where he is established as a deity of worship. After that, you will go into Dhyana. You will go into the meditation part, which comes with Shita Kamala Kucha Mandala. Okay, so yeah, we'll end here today. Otherwise, it will become unmanageable. So tomorrow we will meet and we will start off this whole section with the Dashavatara. So we'll look at Pralaya Payodi Jale, Shita Kamala, and then we will continue on with the concept of Lalita Lavanga. We'll take 4-5 songs and look at them in totality tomorrow. Okay, any questions?
There's nothing in the chat box, but if any of you have any questions, please unmute yourself and you can ask.
Please do. Vortex, mathematics, Matrika, Chakra, I think there'll be no questions today.
No,
I'm a little worried that there will be no questions.
we are like pythons who ate their prey. We'll have a very digestive night and morning tomorrow.
Yeah, I know this.
I had a question.
We'll
let you know tomorrow.
That you have put together, one on top of the other, that have all come together. So I think if we layer these 3 principles in our head, that also became a vortex, actually.
Yeah, it's a vortex only. No, we'll be all spinning out of control by the time we come to, Kuru Yadunandana. By the time we come to Kuru Yadunandana, we'll all be going around in a vortex. Yes, you had a question, Neha, I think. Yes.
Yes. Ma'am, though the vortex and all the metaphysics that you've spoken about, it certainly will take some time to digest. The first time we got to know about it, we'll read about it, and I'm sure with people like you, there'll be more light on this topic. There is one idea that I've had from reading a few texts, and I wanted to know what do you think about it?
Yes.
I got to know for the first time that it is because of the activities that happen in Bengal, that Buddha was added to the Dashavatars.
Yes.
Is it also a reason that the highly Shringar Tattva of Geet Govind is owing to the fact that people were being guided by Buddhism into a sense of nothingness, into a sense of giving up the life of a sansaric person or being grahast, and so to bring them back into what was considered to be the main principle of the world going round. It is that the male and the female unity. That is why Geet Govind has this emphasis on Shringar, and there was some kind of a socio-political ideology that wanted to bring it through the hero and the heroine, where the gods are the hero and the heroine, and therefore the people are motivated that they don't have to give up things, they don't have to become sannyasis to actually realize their life, but it is what Buddhism is leading them into. Do you think this view has some merit?
I don't think so. I don't really think so, because the elements of Buddhism which influenced this Sahajiya Vaishnava that we are talking about, that is the Sahajayana Buddhism and the Vajrayana Buddhism principles, they had extremely developed tantric practices. And tantric practices are by no means are they celibate, by no means are they asexual. And in fact, the Panchashakha, which evolved in Orissa at that time, also spoke about 5 different Buddhas with 5 different consorts.
Okay.
So the whole idea became very complex. Buddhism in its structure started taking so many principles from Tantra and from Shaivism and from so many things that it veered quite away from the original concept of what Buddha had laid down as, the Ashtamargi and the Eightfold Path and everything. So I don't think, because it is these principles that merged into Vaishnavism.
Right.
The tantric principles. So I don't think it was an idea of, that, you'd lead people back into Grihastha, or I don't think it's anything to do with that. But I think it is just that it was very convenient at that time, because Vaishnavism was really coming up because of Ramanujacharya, and Ramanuja has also influenced Jayadeva at that time.
Yeah.
It was very convenient to amalgamate these two and create this dual godhead of Shakti and Krishna, and use the concept of the erotic to establish the concept of the esoteric, because it worked very well, because it's all connected to Saguna Parabrahma idea. Because here are two deities whom you can actually worship, whom you can go ecstatic about. It is that ecstasy which actually resurrected Hinduism. It is not the Vedic principle of dhyana and ritual that actually resurrected Hinduism. It is the concept of bhakti or ecstasy that resurrected it. So I think that was the primary principle there. I don't think it was to bring it back into anything.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Anything else?
Yeah, there's one question actually. The concept of Yamuna and Vastra were in place.
The concept of wait, what? I didn't get that. Sorry.
Concept of Yamuna and Vastra.
Oh, okay. No, that I'll tell you when we come to the second last song. See, when you come to the second last song where they actually unite, where Krishna and Radha unite, we'll talk about that concept there, because there it will make more sense. So we'll talk about it there.
Yeah.
There was some question here about
yes, just
Achintya Bheda something they asked.
Yeah. Can you please tell who represents which Shakti in the context of?
No, there is only one. There is only one Shakti in Achintya Bheda. That is Radha.
Yeah, Hladini,
So
Radha, Tatastha.
No, the Tatastha and Hladini, everything is Radha principle only. It is only Radha who's, dividing and multiplying herself into several other gopis. But there is the Ashtasakhi idea, which developed later, the eight Sakhis of Radha. Now, this Ashtasakhi also tells us very clearly that Krishna Bhakti is deeply influenced by Shakta Tantra, because it is the Ashtamat, the Matrikas concept only that became the Sakhi concept. The Matrikas converted into the Sakhi idea. But that's a completely different discussion altogether. So in Achintya Bheda, there is only one Shakti, and that is Radha. That's all. There are no multiple Shaktis. I found it, Sri Lakshmi, in Brindavan. There is this Sanskrit text with Hindi translations. I found it only in Brindavan, in their publications. What is that? ISKCON. What are the publications called? Not ISKCON, but it's called something there. I don't know what that's. I'll check and tell you.
Brindavan Place, Brindavan. It's not
Place Brindavan. In Brindavan, I found it. Those publications are called something. I'll just check my book and tell you what those are. Ujjwala Neelamani also I got from there only. It is in Sanskrit text with Hindi translations. English I didn't find anywhere. I don't know where we can find the English part of it. Usually ISKCON people will translate everything into English because they have so much of foreign their things. So I don't know, maybe we can find it. Let's see. Let me check. I'll get back.
Ma'am, are the Mangal Shasanas indicated separately in the Geet Govind book?
Yes. It's not part of the 72 shlokas.
Okay.
So they are not there in the Barbara Stoller Miller edition.
Yeah.
They are not there in that.
I think this one has it. Because it has
Does
more
it have?
shlokas than, because it has more shlokas than Barbara Stoller.
Possible, because there are some versions which have it. Like there is one Tamil version, it's the text is in Tamil, the translation is also in Tamil. It has a lot of the Mangala Shasana. It's a very old book, which somebody told me about. So some of them have it, but in English, I'm not able to, find it anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Can you please repeat the representations for 1 to 9? Yeah, sure. You have to wait for 1 minute because I have to find it.
Yeah, there's another question before that also. The concept of Buddhavatar in South India. Is it the Gautama?
No. In Vishishtadvaita, if you look at, those which followed the Vishishtadvaita principle of Ramanuja, that is Vedanta Deshikar, and all these, the Dashavataras which came with them, they completely ignore Gautama Buddha, because their whole thing is to remove Buddhism and resurrect the Vaishnava principle. So that Buddha that they are talking about is called the Puranic Buddha or the Purana Buddha, who occurs in the Tripura Samhara story. Now the Tripura Samhara story of the 3 Rakshasas, the Vidyunmali and 2 others, the Rakshasas, they were reigning supreme, and then the gods had to decide to destroy them. They have 3 Puras, one made of gold, one made of silver, and one made of copper. This whole story is also actually an allegory. It's a mental story. It's an idea of, like Kshirasagara, this is also an allegorical story. So these 3 have to be destroyed, but they will be destroyed. These 3 cities will be destroyed only if they come in a straight line. They have to align. And with one shot, you can destroy all 3. But for these 3 to align, that will never happen, because the wives of the Rakshasas are such, pativratas, that their powers keep these people very strong. That is the idea. So the idea is you have to distract the Patnis in order to, make these Puras align. So that is when all the gods come together and they decide that, okay, we will send one, avatar of Vishnu, who is even more beautiful than Mohini. So we will send him there into the Darukavana, and there he will walk Digambara, he will walk naked. And he'll be so beautiful that hopefully, they will get distracted. So they send Buddha, Vishnu comes as Buddha there, in the form of Buddha. And just for a few seconds, the attention of the Patnis gets distracted, and that is when the Amsha of Vishnu, which is the form of the arrow, is discharged by Shiva's bow. And that one arrow destroys all the three Puras at the same time. So this is the Buddha that is spoken about in the southern Indian, the Vishishtadvaita tradition. So when they talk about, even in Kuchipudi, we have Ranguga Purakantala Vratamulu Bhanga Parachina Bauddhavatara. So that is a reference to the Buddha Avatara of southern India, Purana Buddha. It is not Gautama Buddha. So this is the secondary Buddha that is spoken about. And in Bengal, it is definitely to do with Gautama Buddha. There's no doubt. Okay. Anything else? 1 to 9 you wanted,
1
right?
to 9.
Yes, yes. Yes, 1 to 9. Okay. 1 is earth. 2 is water. 3 is fire. 4 is air. 5 is ether. 6 is manas or mind or heart. For us in Indian thought, there's no difference between mind and heart. Both are called manas. 7 is intelligence or viveka. 8 is false ego, ahankara. 9 is the super soul, the paratattva. Super soul in human mortal form. 0 is transcendental soul. That is complete para. That's the idea. What was that question? Somebody, I just saw one question flash. Is Tulsi also considered one of the 7? No, she's not one of the Sakhis.
There is another question. Can we have 36 tattvas of Kashmir Shaivism?
If I now start explaining the 36 tattvas, when will we finish Gita Govindam? We will have to do another 1 week workshop for that. So I'll tell you, there is some person, I think there is one man who has written a blog on this. I'll try to find that and I'll send the link on the group.
Yes, Akka.
In that he has mentioned all these 36, tattvas. So this is like he writes very interesting blogs on, some of these ideas. So I remember seeing this, that he has mentioned in some place. I'm not sure if he has written all the 36 tattvas, but he has explained Matrika Chakra quite interestingly in that. So let me find that link and I'll send that. But I don't think we can do that in class. Here it will be.
Yeah.
We have too much to wade through already. So are we done for today?
Yes, Akka. There are no more questions.
Okay. All right. So we'll meet tomorrow.
Sure. Thank you so much.
We will start with the actual text. Okay.
Sure. Yes, Akka.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. We'll see you
Thank
tomorrow.
you. See you
Thank
tomorrow.
you.
Thank you.
Bye. See you tomorrow.